I just want to say we get a chance to meet a lot of people. And it is so special when you see something that impacts you in a way and you say, not only am I going to tell my friends about it, I'm going to invite this person to tell a lot of people about what they did to me. This is one of those moments for me on this show. Brene Brown is here. Brene, it's so nice to meet you in this moment.
Ah, nice to meet you.
Welcome.
This is a really fun place. I like it here.
This is fun. This is fun. Now, I've heard you. I've watched your. So let me just give you some facts. So over 40 million views on her TED Talk on vulnerability. I saw your Netflix talk as well. And in the TED Talk, you talk about how a writer was going to describe what you do. So I don't want to misdescribe what you do and who you are. So how do you describe what you do and who you are?
I'm really a researcher and a university professor, and I write books. I mean, that's the long and short of it. And I use a lot of stories. So a lot of people say, Brene Brown, the storyteller.
The storyteller. And
Yeah.
you tell amazing stories that have so much meaning, and it's all very smart, and it's all very relatable, and it's all the things that we struggle with every single day. And she's really funny. I mean, the stand-up, it's like watching stand-up.
Educational stand-up.
Well, because, the human condition is either laughter or tears.
Right.
So
That's all
we're
we
funny
got.
people.
It's either, yes. So I was watching your Netflix talk, and I don't know that I've watched anything that's made me so interested, emotional, and laughed all in the same sort of, however long that was, 90 minutes. I mean, it was truly remarkable. And so thank you. That's why I wanted you to come in, because you definitely struck me. And I know you've done that with millions of people around the world. But one of the things that you talk about a lot is vulnerability.
Yes.
And how difficult it is for us to be vulnerable.
Yeah. I mean, because, weren't you raised to believe that's weakness? I mean, we were raised
100%.
Yeah. Like, fifth generation Texan. I totally remember this scene on a beach in Mississippi growing up. I was like 5 years old, and I saw the people next to me had goggles, and I was like, Dad, can I have some goggles? And he knelt down in front of me and he said, we don't wear goggles in our family. And I'm like, what? And he goes, picture this, sis. You're out at sea, miles away, and your boat goes down, and you can't swim back because you don't have any goggles. And I was like, I'm 5. Like, I'm going to die either way. But I just remember thinking at the time, like, we didn't do goggles or training wheels, or I was raised to believe that being vulnerable was not only weakness, but it made you a sucker.
Yeah.
And so I spent, I think, most of my life trying to outrun and outsmart vulnerability.
Wow.
And then the great irony of life, of course, is that I become a researcher, and I spend 7 years trying to understand, what do these people who believe in themselves share in common? And the answer was vulnerability.
Well, for me, I related in a way of politeness. So I grew up in the South as well.
Yeah.
And everything, we never wanted to make anyone think we were troubled, and we always wanted to be very polite. And by being polite, you're not vulnerable, right?
No.
Because it's like, everything's fine. And forget about me, how are you? And so
Totally.
I find that to be similar in a way, the politeness thing that you're taught as a kid.
No, it's really funny. I do like 90% of my work in organizations right now, and the number one barrier to courageous leadership is the refusal to have tough conversations.
Yeah.
And so when I ask people, so if you're pissed off at someone, or you're frustrated, or their performance isn't what you need it to be, and you're not willing to talk to them about it, what do you do? And this is such a Southern answer. Oh, we don't talk to them, we talk about them.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Behind their backs.
Yeah, totally. And I'm like, that's neither nice nor polite. Like, that's crappy.
But you said in your TED Talk that I saw, you said that you wanted to, part of your motivation was to tackle these difficult conversations in life and break them open. What's on that list?
I think vulnerability is the big one, because it is the center of everything. And for me, I just had this moment where I was at Fort Bragg doing work with Special Forces. And vulnerability is just uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. That's all it is.
Wait, let me process that.
Yeah. So to be vulnerable is to feel uncertain, at risk, and emotionally exposed.
Okay.
Like, someone can see your emotions, and you can't control.
It's terrifying.
Yes, you can't control what they make of them. And then I asked these soldiers a simple question. Can you give me an example of courage, one example of courage that did not involve uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure? And there was just silence until one guy stood up and said, 3 tours, ma'am. There is no courage without vulnerability. And now I've asked that question to 10,000 people. And, and to the listeners today, and to you, and to anyone in this room right now, give me an example of being brave that didn't require you to wrestle with vulnerability. It just doesn't exist.
And, Brene Brown is with us. Her job is to change our lives. You also talk about how vulnerability is joy, right? And we're also afraid of joy.
Oh yeah.
So the Call to Courage is what I saw on Netflix from Brene Brown, and you can see it now. There's so many talks if you go on YouTube to see Brene speak, and she studied us. She studied us for years, and she's written and she's read and she's done stand up about us. And one of the things that really hit me was, and it sounds so strange to say it, but we as human beings are afraid of joy.
So it's so strange, especially coming from someone who studied shame and fear and all these really hard emotions for for 22 years. Joy is actually the most vulnerable of all human emotions because we are so afraid that if we let ourselves lean into it, that we will get sucker punched by hurt and pain and disappointment.
Yeah.
So in those moments, I always, for parents, when you're standing over your kid and you're like, oh my God, I love you like I didn't know was possible. And then you picture something horrible happening to your child. Or, the first time I got to meet Oprah, I was flying out and I was like, there's no way this plane makes it. Like there's no,
That's
what,
crazy.
Yeah. So what we do in order to protect ourselves is we dress rehearse tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
When something great happens, we think about, okay, I'm not going to enjoy this because the other shoe's going to drop and I don't want to get blindsided by pain. And what's really, I think the most tragic thing I've seen, Ryan, probably in the last 5 years especially, is so many people now choosing to live disappointed rather than live joyful and risk feeling disappointed.
And so they're choosing disappointment because they're afraid? Why are they?
Whether it be like in their jobs or marriage?
It doesn't matter.
They're
It's
settling?
like, I'm never going to get too excited about anything or too upset about anything.
I see.
Just,
right in the middle.
But then you miss the mountaintops.
Let me break it down to something, that is less complicated in a way. I had dogs in relationships that when we broke up would always go away, but I didn't have my own dog. Why? Because I was afraid I'd lose my dog someday. So I didn't get a dog. Right?
Yes, that makes sense to me, actually, 100%. Like, I don't need one more thing to love and lose.
Exactly. So I thought, why? Like, I'm sure it'd be great for the 12 years, but then there's that day where I have to say goodbye to that. And I don't want that. I don't want to feel that. And that kept me from, I used that as an analogy, but it was true. But I think I've done that in relationships too. It's like, I can't dive in because this will, we'll end up breaking up and that hurts and that sucks and I hate that.
Yeah, and that's why I always say, the brokenhearted are the bravest among us because they had the courage to love.
Right.
They put themselves out there and they got their hearts broken. But, there's nothing really more powerful and beautiful than a skinned and bruised heart.
But man, is it hard to get to that.
Yeah.
Listen, I could talk to you for hours. And I will say, if you're listening now and you haven't had a chance to see one of Brene's talks, The Call to Courage is the one on Netflix, but there's others up on YouTube. It's really powerful. And watch it with your spouse if you want, because a lot of the couples in the audience, or the people were couples that came to see you.
It's been so amazing on Twitter to see tweets. And like, I have to go to Google Translate because, Netflix goes into like 190 countries.
Yeah.
But so many of the tweets said, that was the most important 90 minutes I've spent, and we've been married for 40 years.
Yeah.
Like in Korean. Like, or, or like one I just saw that said, no idea why we were watching this from South Africa, a white lady talk about vulnerability, but I think it changed our marriage.
I watched it with my husband. It definitely changed our marriage. And I have a question for you. I have a really hard time saying I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you help me with that?
What's the short answer to that?
The short answer is that a lot of us were raised to believe that I'm sorry means there's something wrong with us, and that, it's admitting a flaw or it's shaming for us to say that. But it's not, because, shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. To apologize for what we've done moves us forward in relationship and growth. To apologize for who we are is problematic.
Yeah.
So make sure it's behavioral and not, I'm sorry, I suck. I'm sorry, talking to you that way sucked. To make it behavioral and not about who you are. No one wants to apologize for who we are. Because
I know.
That's not good. But we can apologize for what we've done.
Literally, an argument can be dragged on for hours. And if I would have just said, I'm sorry at the very beginning, it would have been over with. But I physically can't do it. I can't get myself to do it.
Separate self from behavior.
There's a nuance for you right there.
I know.
Brene, thanks for making time. Great
Thanks
to
so
see
much.
you.
Thank you
Great
so
to see
much.
You too. Thanks.